Most people think Disney parks were built for magic. Castles, fireworks, parades, and dreams. But what if all that magic was the misdirection? What if the happiest place on earth was actually a government experiment, hidden in plain sight? Because behind the happy characters and the pixie dust, there is a theory darker than Space Mountain. A theory that says Disney didn't just build attractions, they built a lab, a sprawling, open-air testing ground, quietly designed with help from U.S. intelligence agencies, designed to study you. Every parade route, every ride, every layout, every line you shuffle through. Not just entertainment, but a massive experiment in crowd behavior and control. Every camera tucked behind the scenery, every tracked wristband, a data-hungry surveillance network disguised as fun. Music that shifts your emotions, scents that nudge your behavior, illusions crafted to keep you calm, happy, obedient, and spending. And above it all, a perfectly polished utopia, built to observe how people move, obey, trust, and follow. A social engineering dream. This isn't just another theme park conspiracy. This is the theory that Disney is the government's boldest experiment, a psychological playground wrapped in fairy tales. Welcome to the Disney experiment. My name is Marissa, your morbidly curious host, and this is Death Kiss Traveler, the podcast that dives deep into history, horror, and hauntings at your favorite places. And now a conspiracy that I can't ignore. Thank you for listening. Follow on my social media at Death Kiss Traveler Podcast for photos and breaking news stories. I have never done a conspiracy before on my podcast, but as I research other Disney episodes, little tidbits of this keep popping up. And at this point, I can't ignore it, and I wanted to do a full episode, a real deep dive into the conspiracy of the Disney parks. I read all of your comments, so tell me what you think and make sure you hit that subscribe button. Now buckle up, my friends. It's conspiracy time. To understand the Disney experiment, you have to start long before the castles, the fireworks, and the perfect little kingdom. You have to start with the man who built it. Walt Disney. To the world, he was a gentle storyteller. The man who sketched a mouse, dreamed up a princess, and spun fantasy out of thin air. But behind the animated smiles and Technicolor charm, Walt was slowly becoming something else, something far more valuable to the United States government. It began in the 1930s. Disney's cartoons weren't just popular, they were a cultural tidal wave. Mickey Mouse wasn't a character anymore, he was a symbol. Recognizable, lovable, influential in a way no one had ever seen before. And Washington noticed. When World War II erupted, federal officials came knocking. They didn't want Mickey Mouse, they wanted Walt. They wanted his help in shaping public opinion. They said, "Help us guide the emotions of an entire nation." And Walt said yes. Suddenly, the Disney studios weren't just cranking out fairy tales. They became a covert machine for wartime messaging. Animated training films for soldiers, propaganda shorts warning citizens about enemy influence. Carefully crafted morale pieces meant to unify the home front. Some of these films, classified, locked away, never shown to the public. Inside Washington, Walt earned a quiet reputation. Cooperative, patriotic, steady, and disturbingly effective at shaping how people felt. That reputation opened doors almost no civilian ever walked through. Through the 1940s and 50s, Walt's relationship with federal agencies deepened. He met with officials again and again. The FBI didn't just admire him, they labeled him as an asset. Agents toured the studio, investigations were quietly conducted on Disney property, and Walt's films, became subtle instruments in America's psychological war during the Cold War. Then came Walt's most ambitious idea yet, Disneyland. But when he began planning it, he didn't just call engineers or architects. He called government planners, experts in crowd behavior, city flow, and psychological design. Because Disneyland wasn't just a theme park. Not to Walt, not to the people watching him. It was the first massive experiment in creating a controlled environment, a place where every movement, every motion, every choice could be shaped, a place where fantasy concealed the design. And according to the conspiracy, the government was watching closely. The theory says Walt simply wasn't collaborating, he was being used. A friendly, familiar face placed at the front of a quiet partnership, one that would evolve into the perfect testing ground for surveillance, crowd control, psychological manipulation, and behavioral research. A partnership that created something far bigger and far stranger than a theme park. A place where fantasy hides the experiment. I know it sounds odd, but stay with me. It gets good. Walt Disney built Disneyland in California in 1955. Bright, clean, orderly, and unlike anything the world had ever seen. It wasn't just a theme park. It was a controlled environment where movement, behavior, and crowd flow were deliberately engineered. Then came the bigger leap. By the early 1960s, Walt Disney had a new dream. Something far bigger than Disneyland. Something so massive, so ambitious, so unprecedented that he couldn't build it anywhere people were watching. He needed land. Not a few acres, miles. Miles of untouched, unregulated space where no one would ask questions. And Walt knew exactly where to find it. In the dead center of Florida sat an ocean of swamp. A thick, hostile, isolated environment. A place the world ignored because no one wanted it. Except Walt. But he didn't break ground. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't even tell most of his employees. Instead, he vanished into the shadows and launched one of the most elaborate, covert land acquisitions in American history. That's when the fake companies appeared. I-4 Corporation, Tomahawk Properties, Reedy Creek Ranch, Latin America Development and Management Corp. Names that meant absolutely nothing. Shell companies that didn't exist, except on paper. Through them, Disney quietly bought plots of land. Tiny parcels at first. A swamp acre here, a useless stretch of grass there. Nothing large enough to raise suspicion. Then came more, and more, and more. By the time Florida realized what was happening, it was already too late. Nearly the entire map of Central Florida had turned Disney, and nobody had noticed. Not the locals, not the newspaper, not even the governor. But when the truth finally leaked, it wasn't an amusement that followed. It was panic, because Disney hadn't bought enough land for a theme park. He had bought 47 square miles, twice the size of Manhattan, with no oversight, no explanation, and no clear intention. And when the state officials cautiously asked what he planned to build, Walt delivered an answer that stunned them. He said it was a private, experimental city. Not a town, not a resort, a city. Built by Disney, controlled by Disney, regulated by Disney. A city within its own building codes, its own utilities, its own policing authority. The city had power to issue bonds and almost no interface from the state of Florida. Something like this had never been proposed, and it has never happened again. Government officials were speechless because Walt wasn't proposing a park. He was proposing a controlled environment, a living laboratory disguised as a utopia. The kind of project governments usually design in underground facilities, not something a private corporation crafts with a smile. This is the moment when conspiracy theorists say when the collaboration truly snapped into place. Because Walt's vision didn't just resemble government interests, it perfectly aligned with them. Population behavior studies, city-scale simulation, surveillance testing in a controlled zone, experimental infrastructure, psychological and environmental design. So Florida did something unimaginable. They gave Disney everything they wanted. They gave Disney its own government. The Reedy Creek Improvement District, a corporate-controlled municipality, with sovereign-like power. A kingdom within a country, a company with the authority of a city, a private empire hidden behind a monorail and a castle. Built in secrecy, approved in silence, and never repeated in American history. To the public, it looked like a theme park. But to anyone who knew the full story, it looked like the beginning of something else entirely. But what could that be? Disney parks feel magical the moment you step inside. The music, the colors, the smiles, it all feels effortless, like the world suddenly softens around you. But according to the conspiracy, that magic isn't accidental. It's engineered, designed, calculated, and you, without knowing it, are the test subject. The next time you walk into a Disney park, stop for a moment. Look around. Really look. You'll notice something strange. There's almost no dead ends. Every path bends. Every walkway curves. Every street gently guides you somewhere else, as if the park itself is nudging you forward. That isn't whimsy, that's design. For decades, urban planners have studied Disney parks the way scientists study ants in a maze. Because the layout isn't just efficient, it's predictive. The parks are quiet laboratories in crowd flow, directional control, movement forecasting, emotional pacing, and it's all wrapped up in fairy dust. According to the theory, Walt Disney helped pioneer the very algorithms that later shaped airport terminals, shopping malls, stadiums, and military crowd control strategies. This isn't a park, it's a human behavior playground. When Disneyland was built, the designers didn't hide what they were doing, not at first. They literally called the walkways funnels, carefully sculpted that slip you from one zone to the next, without you ever realizing you're being guided. You think you're choosing where to go, but the conspiracy says something different. You are not choosing at all. You're following cues you never noticed, patterns engineered to make you drift exactly where they want you. The conspiracy starts above ground in the parks, but every guest who walks through the gates of Disney parks sees that same perfect illusion: smiling cast members, fresh paint, music drifting on the breeze. But that's the world above. Below the pavement, beneath the popcorn carts and the parade routes, there's another Disney, a hidden one, a forgotten one, a version most guests will never know exists, and some say was the real reason the park was built the way it was. Because under your feet lies a city, a complete labyrinth, a secret world carved into the Florida swamp long before anyone ever rode Space Mountain. Disney calls them the utilidors, but conspiracy theorists, they call them something else entirely: the city under the city. The tunnels aren't small. They run for miles beneath the Magic Kingdom. Whole roads, offices, cafeterias, costume warehouses, surveillance hubs, storage chambers big enough to swallow a semi-truck. And that's just the part that guests know about. The part Disney admits. Unofficial maps whisper more: sealed corridors, wings without names, heavy doors even cast members can't open, dead-end halls that shouldn't exist, elevators with unlabeled buttons that descend past the lowest floor. Some employees swear the tunnels are so vast that you could build an entire second park down there. Why bury a sprawling underground system in unstable swampland? Why spend millions on reinforced concrete, ventilation systems, and military-level engineering? decades before the underground city design was normal. Unless secrecy was the point. Unless the real operations were never meant to be seen. And here's the detail most people don't know. A large chunk of the tunnels were built after the park opened. And that's when the whispers begin. Cast members talk about the dark zones of the tunnels, red tag doors that are not allowed to be opened, lights always off even during the day, only accessible with an escort and a badge you're never allowed to see, rooms that hum like machines running behind the walls. A few swear they saw biometric scanners, strange machinery, cold storage rooms with no labels, soundproof chambers that echo wrong, hallways that get colder the deeper you walk. Of course, Disney denies it all, but if there's nothing down there, why guard it like a federal building? One of the oldest theories say the tunnels contain observation rooms, windowless bunkers filled with screens and monitors, broadcasting live feeds from every corner of the park. Rooms where analysts track crowd flow, emotional reactions, panic, movement, purchasing decisions, every smile, every scream, every hesitation. According to the theory, the rides are entertainment, the lines are experiments, the guests are subjects. And I'll get into more detail about this later. And then there's the part almost everyone agrees on. There are levels below the tunnels. Sub-basements, shadow floors, hidden zones rumored to include government research rooms, Cold War safe houses, biometric testing labs, prototype storage for experimental tech, abandoned Epcot-era projects, and even Walt himself. I did an episode all about this earlier. Go back and listen to that Walt Disney episode. There are people that think that Walt, or at least his head, is still cryogenically frozen underneath Disney World. Cast members have their own names for these places. The Subterranean Zone, Level B, the Deep Tunnels, or the Dark Hallways. Disney insists they don't exist. Former employees quietly insist they do. In another strange detail, some tunnels have cameras that never show up in security logs. Doors drawn on old maps, but nowhere to be found in the real corridors. Emergency exits that open into concrete walls. Freight elevators that descend to floors nobody talks about. Several cast members confessed to the same experience. Quote, "I took a wrong turn once and ended up somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. My supervisor told me to never walk down that hallway again. It felt as if someone was watching me from behind the walls." End quote. Most of these employees were reassigned, and some simply stopped talking. But the most unsettling part involves the blueprints. The original tunnel schematics, the ones from the earliest construction, are missing. Not misplaced, not mislabeled, they are gone. Researchers, journalists, even urban planning historians have tried to request them. But the records vanished from public archives and from the files of the Reedy Creek Improvement District. All that remains are whispers of what those missing plans showed. Deep access corridors, multi-level shafts, concrete chambers not listed in any Disney document. A mysterious zone labeled only as Zone C Containment. One former Imagineer claimed there was an entire wing designed for something else. Quote, "There were doors with no labels, but someone was always in those rooms. The handles were always warm." End quote. Another cast member described hearing a low-frequency hum from sealed metal hatches late at night, the kind that vibrates your teeth. He said his supervisor warned him, "Curiosity gets you terminated." When Reedy Creek was trying to be dissolved, reporters filed public record requesting for historical construction files. Dozens of documents appeared, but none related to the full underground layout. Some were marked unavailable, others were labeled non-existent. A few were completely blacked out. So the real question remains, did Disney really lose the most important architectural plans in theme park history? Or did someone make sure that the world never learns what lies beneath the happiest place on Earth? The conspiracy theorists say the tunnels are the backbone of the entire Disney government partnership. Invisible movement of staff, undetected monitoring of guests, storage of experimental tech, real-time behavior tracking, hidden laboratories, connections to deeper, unknown facilities. Above ground, you see Main Street, USA. Below, a network built like a military installation, watching, measuring, cataloging millions of their guests without their knowledge. Because above ground is fantasy, below ground is the experiment. And here's where the story goes from, huh, to, oh no, I've been watched buying a churro. Disney was testing surveillance way before it was cool. According to the conspiracy, the parks were basically Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley existed. They supposedly played with motion tracking cameras, prototype facial recognition, heat maps that follow sweaty crowds, cameras that predict where you'll walk next. Yes, just like you're a Roomba. Early RFID tracking and custom guest behavior profiles. And then came the magic bands. Disney says they're for convenience. Conspiracy theorists say, girl, that is a tracking device with Mickey ears. Because once you put on a magic band, the system knows. It knows where you walk, how fast you move, what you buy, what you stare at too long, when you get stressed, and what you avoid. Probably it's a small world. Millions of people mapped like dots in a giant happy ant farm. And deep underground, beneath the princess dresses and ice cream Mickeys, are rooms filled with screens, maps, and staff watching movement patterns like it's the Super Bowl. Disney calls it guest optimization. Conspiracy believers call it the largest voluntary surveillance experiment in American history. Because everything in the parks, every sound, scent, path, character greeting, is designed to see how humans react inside a perfectly controlled world. How they move, how they gather, how they panic, how they calm down, how they obey, and especially how they spend money. Think about it. If you were the government and you wanted to test crowd dispersal, emotional manipulation, mass messaging, subtle compliance, behavioral prediction, what better place than a theme park millions walk into willingly? And the wildest part? We don't notice because the whole experiment is wrapped in fireworks, Dole Whip, and a giant cartoon mouse. And if you wanted to test how humans react to cameras, scanners, sensors, and tracking, what better than a place where everyone hands over their info with a smile? According to the conspiracy theorists, that's exactly what happened. Disney used facial recognition before it was a thing. Airports didn't announce facial recognition until the early 2000s. But did you know Disney had this technology way before? In the conspiracy version, they weren't used for magic or even security. The cameras were mapping your face. The government needed huge crowds, fast data, people who didn't question cameras everywhere. Disney had all of that, wrapped in pixie dust. They believe early scanners captured facial measurements, how you walk, how you behave, long before the rest of the world even knew that technology existed. Some researchers think Disney worked with developers of wide area surveillance systems, the kind used in overseas conflict zones. These systems can zoom in from miles away and track an individual in a crowd. They can analyze your behavior and run patterns of recognition. And in the parks, they are allegedly hidden lampposts, rocks, parade floats, castle decor. If this is true, Disney is a giant, glowing observation dome. They also had fingerprint scanning before anyone else. Disney rolled out the finger scanners in the mid-90s, but they weren't normal fingerprint readers. They were biometric geometry scanners, the type used at government facilities. Why would a theme park need that? The conspiracy answer? The scanners supposedly came from defense contractor projects for military ID, border security, data matching, and Disney World became the test lab, dressed up as a vacation. And with those vacationers, they were able to use crowd control technology that ended up in the military. We already talked about it, but remember, Disney moves people like no one else. No jams, no panic, no chaos. And the theory says that's because Disney tested real-time crowd modeling, predictive movement, hidden navigation cues, choke point behavior. This same technology later showed up in evacuations, high-security events, urban warfare simulations. If you want to study how crowds react to color, sound, signs, and subtle nudges, Disney is basically the world's friendliest human behavior lab. Almost every major surveillance technology we use today, facial recognition, biometrics, crowd algorithms, RFID tracking, all appeared at Disney before the public saw them anywhere else. Coincidence? Or the friendliest testing ground on the earth? Because if you wanted to study human behavior, why not test it in a place full of fireworks, churros, and people happily tapping their magic bands? And that's before we even get to the rides, which according to the conspiracy theorists, aren't just entertainment. They're giant psychological conditioning machines. And that's where I leave you today, because this episode was so long, and part 2 is just as wild. The rides, the movies, and more. I am going to post more of this on my social media. I hate to leave you hanging, but this episode could have been well over 3 hours long, and I didn't want to do that to you. So I'll see you next Friday with more of the Disney Experiment. Thank you for listening to Death Kiss Traveler. This podcast is written and researched by me, Marissa. See show notes for details. Are you looking for a super fun vacation? Let Sun-Kissed Traveler do all the work and take the stress out of traveling this holiday season. See show notes for details or visit sun-kissedtraveler.com. I'll see you next week.